Subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to get all the latest updates. The Prime Minister has issued a response on the China crisis, the violent face-off that has taken place between Chinese and Indian troops in Ladakh, which has seen at least 20 soldiers, including a commanding officer, die in the line of duty. The Prime Minister has said that these sacrifices will not go in vain. China has issued a statement saying it does not want any further escalation. But many specific details are still hazy, and a question remains over what India can, will, and should do next. One of our senior most military veterans has been warning that this was a crisis waiting to happen. He's been writing about it, he's been tweeting about it, he was saying it when it was an unpopular opinion to take. Former Northern Army Commander General H.S. Panag is the person I'm talking about. He is with us now. Thank you, sir. I've been following everything that you've been saying, and I know that when we saw our soldiers martyred at the front line, you were very anguished because you have been arguing for several weeks now that the Chinese troops had actually taken over large swaths of Indian territory, and you've been making the point. What do you think happened? Why was nobody paying attention to what you were saying?
See, firstly, we were taken by surprise, and you are well aware that, like Kargil, we were surprised both at the strategic level. The research and analysis wing failed to note that this was China's intention and that they had moved regular troops from the exercises, and the regular troops were fast replacing the border defense units of China. At the tactical level, when we saw this activity taking place, I'm sure they would have seen it because especially in the area of Pangong Tso and in the area of Hot Springs, the area is totally devoid of cover, and there is no, it's a very open sort of an area. So we could see that the Chinese are up to this kind of activity where regular troops have come in. And we did not preempt them. Rather, they preempted us and came and seized the areas in Pangong Tso, where we had a differing perception. They came up to Finger 4, blocked us, thereby seizing the area between Finger 4 and Finger 8 and the heights to the north, an area of about 40 square kilometers. Something similar they did at Hot Springs, but there was no dispute at Hot Springs and the Gogra post, but we were making a road to Konkala, and they came and sat in between, and thereafter blocked our route to Konkala. So that's another small intrusion area. In the Galwan River, again there was no dispute. The line of actual control was 5 kilometers from the junction of the Galwan with the Shok River, and we were patrolling up to there, so were the Chinese. And this has been going on. As soon as we went forward into the forward posture, sometimes in the late 80s and early 90s, after 62 war. So what the Chinese did here was, because this is the area from where they can cut off our strategic road to Daulat Begodi sector.
Yes.
Because it runs on the west bank of Shok River. So they came in a short distance, then they stored the heights. Why I'm emphasizing the heights here rather than Pangong is, and this was a point missed by us, because the battle in high altitude and mountains is for the heights. You have yourself seen and reported it, that whosoever controls the heights controls the valley.
That's right.
Eventually. And in a hot wall, you can't sustain yourself in the valley. So this is the reason why they came into Galwan. And we misread the situation. Our misreading was at the strategic level and at the tactical level, both. The Chinese had come for a proper military operation with the strategic intent to impose their hegemony on us and also prevent us from developing a border infrastructure to their sensitive areas of Aksai Chin. And so this, we felt that we read the situation that it is just a border incident taking place, like Depsang, like Chumar, and like Doklam. We were lulled into complacency. So our actions were the border policing actions, and we dragged rather than restricting it to the ITBP, we dragged the army into it. And on top of that, we to to prevent escalation, we sort of told them not to fire, not to use their weapons. In fact, what has happened is it is the most serious thing that has ever taken place, a blatant murder of a score of our troops, including the commanding officer, and clubbed to death. So this hasn't happened in the entire history of the Indian Army, that Indian troops have been battered to death without arms. And the decision not to carry arms would have been taken at the highest level within the military. And the military would not have taken this decision to manage this situation in this manner, like a border incident, rather than like a to face up to a broader military, action of China
So
without political clearance.
let me ask you that. We do now know that the Indian troops thought that they were going to supervise what was meant to be a withdrawal by the Chinese, and they went in unarmed. Now, as someone who has reported military conflict, but as a layperson, I'm asking you, sir, how would that happen? Why would our troops go in unarmed? Like, in what circumstance would a CO say to his men, we won't carry our weapons? Like, why would that happen at all?
I am not only surprised, I am shocked at this development, because it is one thing for the police to act like that. What does the police do? Police first carries out a danda charge, and then as a last resort fires. What does the army do? As a first resort, you fire, and you take proper use of forces with firearms. Now we were trying, as I said, I repeat, we were trying to manage the incident like one of the earlier border small affairs, where after you have a face off and after about 15-20 days, the Chinese used to go back. It happened in Depsang, it happened in Chumar, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, right? It happened to an extent in Doklam. The situation was very different there. And that is why the troops were unarmed, and as a policy, both within the military and probably from the political hierarchy. Whereas we didn't realize that when troops are in a confrontation like this, either by design by the Chinese who want to trigger the incident, or by accident, troops are facing each other, you are jostling, you're pushing, and and earlier we have graduated to clubs. It is only a matter of time before even this jostling became more violent. So this is why it happened. Treating a military situation where the enemy has secured the heights and is confronting you in the valley merely to face with you, we allowed our soldiers to go unarmed. This was the incident waiting to happen. In fact, I am horrified. I repeat, it is not that they have been killed in action, but looking at it from another point of view, it is murder.
So that's a very strong statement to make. Now, when a murder takes place, when our soldiers are battered as they were, clubbed to death, one has to ask the difficult question, why did this happen? One of the reasons you've cited is that it was treated as a normal border standoff. What should happen now? It's not clear that we know everything that's happened. It's not clear that we know the casualties. It's not clear that we know the exact number of injured. As responsible journalists, we do not want to speculate. But you're a senior officer who's had an inside track of this entire episode. What do you feel is still waiting to unfold?
I think firstly the Chinese the Chinese design for the moment. Their initial design is very clear. They have done these intrusions in specific areas from where they perceive that your border infrastructure is going to pose a threat to region and their other vulnerable areas, and they have come prepared for border skirmishes, or I would say even go up to the level of a limited war. They have come prepared, and they have created a situation for us that they are daring us that the ball is in your court, now you respond. So this is the current, and they have seized the initiative. They had the surprise, and after this incident in particular, when India is angry, they have put the ball in our court. So the next logical question is, what should be our response? I think firstly, setbacks do take place. Whatever the reasons for which the background of these incidents, the incident has happened. It's a great tragedy, and I would say for the first time in the history of the Indian Army, something like this has happened. And we should think with a cool mind. We should not rush in to take revenge like we tend to do with Pakistan. Even there it is wrong. Even there it is wrong, because your actions at the strategic level should be thought out, premeditated, and you should go at the time and of your own choosing, not into a rush, and then try to make something big out of a small incident. So we should think with a cool mind. A lot of sometimes what happens that these incidents, they may have taken place at lower level on the Chinese side, though their foreign ministry has denied all this. The incident may have been triggered because of a confrontation at the lower level. Okay, now it may give us a diplomatic opening. So the first approach should be diplomatic. Even China doesn't want a war. It wanted a limited situation to embarrass us, which it has created, and to that extent it has achieved its aim. We should swallow the bitter pill for the moment, and we should negotiate. And what should be our aim of these negotiations? Status quo ante, our political will rather political aim, status quo ante April 2020, and at least demarcation of the LC hereafter, so that such incidents don't take place. And this process may take time, but we should give it a try. The level should be raised. It cannot be resolved at military level. Military level negotiations just separate the troops. The decision now, the negotiations rather, would be at the political level and at the highest level if required, because it is worth it. If diplomacy fails, then we have to take the hard decision that we have to also resort to use of force to pursue and achieve our political aim. And while China enjoys a distinct military edge over us, and especially in terms of technology, but Indian Army is a very seasoned army. We know our terrain, and we know what to do in such a situation. But we must remember that we'll have to take precautions, because incidents can open up in other sectors as well, as the reports have been there. The Chinese have taken precautionary action, and we must not forget our aim. Try to keep the conflict, if it emerges, if it reaches that stage, localized, something like what we did in Kargil, and we clearly limit our aim to say that we want status quo ante 2020.
But sir, I was
And thereafter we want demarcation.
now you are saying that the Chinese came in possibly with the intention of a limited war, and Kargil technically is classified as a limited war. Let me ask you the elephant in the room. Are we on the brink of a Kargil Kargil-like conflict with China?
Not yet. Not yet. I think we should first give diplomacy a chance. After all, our government has given diplomacy a chance for the last almost 8 weeks. This whole thing began in end of April and whole of May, and now we are getting to be the third week of June. We should, if we have waited this long, let's wait more. We should give diplomacy a chance and let it, because that will also give us an opportunity. Should diplomacy fail, then we should decide when we want to take this action. There's no urgency. The action should suit our military plans. And about those, I don't want to talk as yet. Because this whole issue of revenge is a nationalist agenda. You don't, at the strategic level, you don't look for revenge and vendetta.
But sir, the politics of the BJP have been built on that muscular nationalism, and there will be public pressure from their own supporters ki kuch karke dikhaiye. That will happen.
Yeah, it's like this, that nationalism is a tiger that you can ride, but it's very difficult to get off it. Yes, it's a problem. But I'm sure that's why I have been saying in my articles the Prime Minister should take the nation into confidence. If the Prime Minister speaks the plain truth, well, this has happened. It's a setback. We are faced with this situation, but we are committed to dealing with it with a cool head, and we will take appropriate diplomatic and military action as deemed fit. I'm sure he even has it today. In fact, I have signed off my article, which is going likely to come out tomorrow, where I've said that I place my services at his disposal even as a veteran. One has spent so much of time in the army, one knows so many things, we can assist. That everybody will be behind him. But don't don't rely upon denial and obfuscation to fool your own countrymen. Please tell us what has happened to the within the realm of security, which has to be maintained, and we are all there always to support our government and our prime minister.
Sir, there are certain things that remain unclear since you are talking about the Prime Minister needing to take the country into confidence. For example, there were hazy reports about Chinese casualties. The Global Times, the China mouthpiece, claiming that there were Chinese casualties, nothing specific. Then there were hazy reports about 45 Chinese casualties. The government today, the Prime Minister in his statement has not referenced these. There are reports emerging of many Indian soldiers injured. We don't have the full accurate picture yet. How much information should the government be providing to the people at this point?
I think these things can best be kept. Need not be told immediately because it's an emotional subject, especially the death of a large number of soldiers, and that also in these circumstances, people are killed in action. Every year we lose 400-500 soldiers in accidents and various other things. When that terrain-related casualties in all over Northern Command and Eastern Command. But in these circumstances, so to that extent, it is the government and the military's right and the correct thing to do to apply the need to know principle. But what I'm trying to say, see, what we did was earlier, when I'm talking of what you can tell within the realm of security is, we said nothing has happened. Chinese have not come in. They are on their side of the LAC, and no territory has been lost. So this was the narrative, right? Now, the Chinese are known to exploit your national narrative. So our national narrative was we have become very strong. We are going to seize back our territories. Nobody dared look us in the eye, etc. Now the Chinese said, they took the plea. Well, we are in our own territory. We are not doing anything. So what did we do by that denial? We played into the Chinese hand. Whereas had we just shared with the nation that, well, in these things, this is the circumstances and this is what has happened. We are taking appropriate action and we will deal with the situation. Fair enough.
Yeah, and that's what.
So, but you cannot be in do all. See, the same thing happened to Prime Minister Nehru. He kept everything hidden from us till 1959 when the Konkala incident took place.
And you
In 19.
You have drawn an analogy between this moment and the Konkala Pass debacle. Can you elaborate for our viewers who may be too young to know what Konkala Pass, what happened there? We know 9 Indian soldiers died in clashes with Chinese troops. But tell our viewers why you compare it to that moment.
See, because what happened is that in the 50s, India was very weak economically. Nehru decided to focus on economy, and though he's much maligned that he neglected the army, but the fact is that even today the Chinese have an edge over us and our economy is much better. How could Nehru in the early 50s create an army when the nation was hungry and we were dependent on foreign aid for food, let alone anything else? So he decided that he will handle China with diplomacy and by other means. So what we did on the borders when China made the road, and even both sides, Nepal as well as Ladakh, that we followed a pragmatic forward policy. No, it is distinct from the forward policy which we followed in 59, 60, 61. I'll come to that. So we followed a pragmatic forward policy, which is that these were empty spaces which we could not occupy because of lack of infrastructure. So we'll move forward and we will plant our flag. Now, this was the early part. I'm talking of the 50s. Now, what we did was we used the Assam Rifles, paramilitary in Northeast. We successfully reached the LS, the McMahon line as early as 1952-53. In Ladakh, Chinese preempted us, but Intelligence Bureau and CRPF, they were the pioneers there. They went and started creeping forward. And some of our posts, for example, the Galwan Valley post was almost close to the mouth of the Galwan River, almost 70, 80 kilometers upstream. That was where the Galwan post is. And incidentally, it was in I think July 62 that the Galwan incident took place. But that's another story. Now coming back to Konkala, so as we were moved forward by 59, the patrols started meeting each other. Now was the time. Pragmatism said that we have a weak army. We don't have infrastructure. Let's negotiate. Chow En-lai at that stage offered negotiation. He said, we'll settle wherever we are. Let's go back 20 kilometers. In 59, December, November, he again came to India, again offered to negotiate. But Prime Minister Nehru refused. But what had happened in October at Konkala was that as we went forward and we were now trying to proceed towards Lanakla now, the southern side of Aksai Chin, that the Chinese intercepted our patrol, led by one Karam Singh, and nine CRPF Jawans were killed, 3 were wounded, 7 were taken prisoner of war. Now, till then, the country didn't know what was happening there. That we had reached this stage, clashes have started. There was a small incident at Longju 2 months prior, where only one person was taken prisoner of war, later released. So now the parliament came to know there was an uproar in the parliament, and the media. I was 14. I was then about 10 years old. I still remember being an army brat. That the media came out with banner headlines, and they said that this is unpardonable, and that then the famous lines about not a blade of grass grows there, and all those things happened. But Nehru came under severe pressure. Now he had to take a decision whether to negotiate or whether to, and he, with the rush of blood and the embarrassment faced in front of the country, rushed in. And the next 3 years was just the unfolding of a tragedy that finally culminated in November 62. So this was at that time. Now let me compare it to today. What happens today? We are economically much better, but China's economy is 5 times up. Right? Number one. So we have a long way to go for our economy to catch up. Militarily, we are better. We have improved. We are not an army of 62. We are a very potent army. But the Chinese army, especially in the last 20 years, through their reforms, have technologically gained a distinct edge over us. There's asymmetry. China has got military superiority. And today, this incident, Konkala, focused the country's attention 58 years ago, or the time you can calculate, then in front of the people of India who were kept in dark till then. And same way, the Galwan Valley incident has now come before the nation, and the nation is angry. So that's why all the more reason that we must not rush in immediately just because we want revenge or vendetta. And we should think with a cool mind and think at the strategic level.
But sir, here's the question. What we still don't know is what happened to how this conflict started, which was the Chinese incursion into Indian territory, right? If you are saying don't rush in emotionally for revenge, what about getting the Chinese off our soil? We, at the moment...
Yeah, I am with you. I'm with you, but it has happened. Now they have got the initiative. Even if they were not sitting at the height, neither did you preempt them. Neither in this period have you secured the heights. So North of Pangong, they have got the height. They are sitting on the heights on Galwan Valley. if you take it from me, that they would have secured the heights or up to wherever the terrain allowed, because the terrain is very difficult there.
Right.
They would have. That's why you heard of these clips and all. So you will be getting in from a position of disadvantage. If you want to do it elsewhere, you will trigger the war. You will preempt the diplomatic process, which can give us an opening. And this incident is bad, but diplomacy should be still first priority. We should take our time. If we have seen all this happening for 2 months. We can wait. We can wait for another 5 months if required. We should go when the military says the time is opportune, because there are factors related to climate, weather, and everything, and those can all be kept in mind. And please remember that 62 began in the month of the actual operations in the month of October for 4-5 days, and the month of November for 4-5 days. And the Chinese were hard pressed to stay put. They had to withdraw with the changing weather. So there are a whole lot of factors that we can be kept in mind, are kept in mind by the military. We must do it when we want to do it. We cannot have another debacle on our hands when you rush in and the Chinese are better prepared than us, and we again unnecessarily have a setback. So when we go with a clear mind that we are going to win and we are going to send the Chinese back.
One final question, sir. What should be the learning? I know you must feel very personally, but tragically vindicated at everything you've been writing and saying for the last 2 months. What should be the lesson for the government at this point from what has happened?
I think one is that national security is not an issue that should be permanently linked with electoral, or I would say with domestic politics. It must be kept distinct. It requires the national will. It requires the collective national will. The opposition must be part of our national security posture, our strategy. And there should be a consensus in the whole nation, in the parliament, amongst the people, that this is the national security strategy we must adopt. And this strategy must be partially in public domain, so that we know how our government will respond to Pakistan or to. The next lesson is that rhetoric and drum beating on national security issues, especially when it involves other countries, must not be a norm. You want to do something, do it. Do it in a cool, calculated manner. Do it preemptively. Do it at the time of your own choosing. But for heaven's sake, not every day start shouting from the rooftops that we'll do this, we'll do that. And this is taken very seriously by certain countries. And the third thing is, and that's, don't exploit the military. Don't exploit the military. The military has been put center stage, and the certain actions that one has been watching, and I would say certain actions in this manner, I think the military did not give, I would say, a crystal clear professional advice to the government. I, for one, would never accept a full-fledged unit to confront another Chinese unit without weapons in the valley area or anywhere, whether Pangong Tso or whether Galwan. And our military hierarchy could not have taken this decision unilaterally. And it did not advise the government. If the political direction came in this manner, we'll handle it like this, then they didn't correctly advise the government. So the military should be kept away. And the military hierarchy must remember that they are professionals first and, part of the national milieu later. And this is what the lesson I feel.
Sage words, sir. You've been saying this for 2 months. Some of us have been following everything you've been saying. In this case, I know you wish that you were wrong, because tragically you were right. Sometimes
it's lot of my friends said your stand is vindicated. I said anguished to be vindicated in this manner.
Yes, sir. But I hope to listen to you going forward. Pleasure. I've learned so much from listening to you, sir. I hope many more people in this country and in the government pay close attention to you, General Pannad. Pleasure as always talking to you. Thank you.